Hello guys, welcome to Ben 10 What If. So in this video, we will see what if Ben 10 had to fight every past wielder of the Omnitrix. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1, the tournament begins. The wall behind Ben exploded, sending chunks of concrete raining down as he dove behind a dumpster. Just another Tuesday in Bellwood. Anyone ever notice how these guys always attack during school hours? Ben brushed debris from his jacket. I mean, seriously, couldn't they wait until after chem class? I was actually understanding the material for once. A massive crystalline creature stomped through the hole it had made in Bellwood High's eastern wall. Students scattered across the parking lot, screaming as the 12-foot behemoth roared. Petrosapien hybrid, Ben muttered, activating the Omnitrix on his wrist. The familiar holographic display of alien silhouettes appeared. Alright, let's see how you like fighting fire with fire. Or crystal with crystal, I guess. Ben slammed down on the Omnitrix, emerald light engulfing his body. The transformation took less than a second, and where Ben had stood now loomed the crystalline form of Diamond Head. Hey, ugly! Ben shouted, stepping into the open. School's out for you, buddy. The creature turned, its faceted eyes narrowing as it spotted another Petrosapien. It let out a guttural roar and charged, crystal fists extending into jagged spears. Ben braced himself, transforming his hands into diamond-hard blades. That the best you got? The alien's attack came fast, faster than Ben expected. He barely managed to deflect the first strike, the impact sending vibrations through his crystalline body. The creature pressed its advantage, its movements more fluid than any Petrosapien Ben had encountered before. Whoa, you've got some moves. Ben leapt backward, reshaping his arm into a shield to block a vicious jab. But I've got a few of my own. Ben thrust his other hand forward, sending a barrage of crystal shards at his opponent. The creature deflected most but caught several in its shoulder, staggering back. Ben! Gwen's voice called from across the parking lot. His red-headed cousin was running toward him, hands already glowing with mana. Kevin followed close behind, his hand touching a metal beam and absorbing its properties. Stay back! Ben shouted. This one's different. The distraction cost him. The crystalline monster caught him with a devastating uppercut that sent Ben flying into a parked car. The vehicle's alarm blared as its roof caved inward. Great, Ben groaned, pulling himself from the wreckage. Someone's insurance doesn't cover damage during alien throwdown. The creature was advancing again, but something strange was happening. The center of its chest began to glow with a pulsing blue light, and the air around it seemed to shimmer and distort. Guys? Ben called out. Anyone seen this before? The Omnitrix on Ben's chest suddenly sparked, green electricity arcing across his crystalline form. Pain shot through his body, something that rarely happened in alien form. What the? Ben looked down at the symbol, which was now flashing erratically between green and blue. This can't be good. The creature let out a deafening roar and slammed both fists into the ground. Instead of the expected shockwave, a ripple of blue energy expanded outward like a tidal wave. When it reached Ben, the Omnitrix went haywire. Ben! Gwen screamed, throwing up a mana shield as she ran toward him. Kevin shouted something too, but Ben couldn't hear him anymore. The world around him stretched and warped like putty. The Omnitrix symbol on his chest burned with blinding intensity, and then, darkness. Wakey wakey, Benjamin. Ben's eyes snapped open. The familiar voice had cut through the darkness like a knife. He was no longer Diamond Head, he was back in human form, lying flat on his back on what felt like glass. Professor Paradox. Ben blinked up at the time traveler standing over him, familiar in his lab coat and goggles pushed up on his forehead. The very same. Though perhaps not precisely the Paradox you know. The man offered a hand, pulling Ben to his feet. Temporal distinctions become rather academic at my level. Ben looked around, his jaw dropping as he took in his surroundings. He stood on a massive platform made of what looked like blue-tinted crystal that seemed to float in nothing. Beyond the edges of the platform was a swirling maelstrom of colors and shapes, fragments of different realities blending together in a chaotic void. "Okay, I've seen some weird stuff, but this takes the cake," Ben said, approaching the edge cautiously. "Where are we? Or maybe when are we?" Paradox smiled, checking his pocket watch. "An excellent question with a complex answer. The simplest explanation is that we're in a nexus dimension, a pocket reality that exists at the crossroads of multiple universes. And I'm here because you've been selected, Benjamin." Paradox snapped his pocket watch shut. "Selected for the Wielder's trial." Ben raised an eyebrow. "The what now?" "Look, I was kind of in the middle of something. Giant crystal alien attacking my school. Ring any bells?" "Oh, that little fracas." Paradox waved dismissively. "Don't worry. Time passes differently here. When, if, you return, barely a moment will have passed." "If?" Ben's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean, if?" The platform beneath them suddenly trembled, and the crystal began to shift and reform. Sections rose from the floor, creating walls, archways, and what looked distinctly like an arena. The transformation continued until they stood in the center of a massive coliseum, with seating areas extending upward around them. And those seats were beginning to fill. Creatures of all shapes and sizes, some recognizable as alien species Ben knew, others completely foreign, materialized in the stands. Their voices created a growing cacophony that echoed throughout the structure. "What is this, some kind of space gladiator thing?" Ben demanded, turning back to Paradox. "Because I've done the whole fight for your life for alien entertainment bit before, and I'm not a fan." Paradox chuckled. "Nothing so primitive, Benjamin. This is something far more significant." He gestured around them. "The multiverse is vast, with infinite variations of reality. In many of these realities, different individuals have wielded the Omnitrix, or versions of it." "You mean like that time I met Ben 23? The guy with the blue Omnitrix who named all his aliens differently?" "Precisely. Though Ben 23 is merely one example among countless others." Paradox's expression grew serious. "The Omnitrix is more than just a transformation device, Benjamin. It's a nexus of possibility, a fulcrum upon which the fate of entire dimensions can turn." The professor looked up as a particularly bright light appeared above the arena. Descending through this light was a being Ben recognized immediately, a Celestialsapian, one of the most powerful species in the universe. Unlike Alien X, this one appeared older somehow, its starry form bearing intricate patterns that seemed to shift constantly. "The Forger," Paradox said with a respectful nod toward the being. "One of the celestial sapiens who has taken particular interest in the Omnitrix and its wielders across the multiverse." The Forger hovered above them, its featureless face somehow conveying intense scrutiny as it observed Ben. "So what's this trial thing about?" Ben asked, trying not to show his nervousness under the cosmic being's gaze. "The multiverse is facing a crisis," Paradox explained. "One that requires the ultimate wielder of the Omnitrix to address. The trial is a tournament of sorts, a competition to determine which version of the Omnitrix bearer is most worthy." Ben laughed nervously. "And let me guess, I have to fight all these other versions of myself?" "Not just versions of yourself," Paradox corrected. "Any being who has wielded the Omnitrix across the multiverse. Some will be familiar, variants of Ben Tennyson. Others will be individuals you've never imagined with the power of the Omnitrix." The crystal floor shifted again, creating a raised dais where the Forger now settled. The Celestialsapian raised its arms, and a booming voice echoed through the arena, though Ben noticed its mouth didn't move. "The Wielder's trial commences. Combatant Benjamin Tennyson of Timeline Prime, A173 will face the first challenge." The crowd roared in response, the sound almost deafening. Wait, I never agreed to this. Ben protested, turning to Paradox. The time traveler's expression was sympathetic but firm. I'm afraid you have little choice, Benjamin. The temporal disruption you experienced wasn't random, it was the method of your selection. The trial has already begun. But what about Gwen? Kevin? That thing attacking the school? As I said, time moves differently here. Your friends are safe, for now. Paradox placed a hand on Ben's shoulder. But I won't mislead you, this trial is perilous. Some who enter do not return to their home dimensions. Before Ben could respond, a section of the arena floor slid open, and a platform rose from below. Standing on it was a figure that made Ben do a double take. She looked like him, sort of. Same brown hair, though longer and pulled into a ponytail. Same green eyes, same confident stance. She wore a white jacket with a black stripe down the center, a black shirt, and jeans. And on her wrist was an unmistakable device, an Omnitrix, though its design was slightly different from his own. Ben Tennyson, she called out with a smirk. I've heard stories about you. Gotta say, you're shorter than I expected. And who are you supposed to be? Ben asked, though he had a pretty good guess. She gave a mock bow. Jennifer Tennyson. But you can call me Gen 10. Where I come from, I'm the hero with the watch. She raised her wrist, displaying her Omnitrix proudly. And apparently, I get to show you how it's done. The forger's voice boomed again, first challenge, JEN 10 of Dimension G10, B278. Victory condition, incapacitation or surrender. Paradox stepped back, moving to the edge of the arena. Good luck, Benjamin. Remember, each opponent has something to teach you. Pay attention. Wait. Ben called after him. Any tips? Advice? Anything? Paradox simply tapped his pocket watch. Time's wasting. With that, a shimmering barrier appeared between the combatants and the edge of the arena where Paradox now stood with the spectators. Jen cracked her knuckles. Don't worry, cousin. I'll try not to embarrass you too badly in front of all these nice interdimensional beings. Cousin. Ben activated his Omnitrix, cycling through his aliens. I thought you were like, an alternate me or something. Details, Jen shrugged. In my world, I'm Grandpa Max's granddaughter. You don't exist. I found the Omnitrix when I was 10, just like you. She activated her own Omnitrix, the core popping up. But I've got a feeling I use it better. Fighting talk from someone I've never heard of, Ben retorted, settling on his selection. Ladies first. Jen grinned. Such a gentleman. She slammed down on her Omnitrix, emerald light enveloping her. When it faded, a sleek, blue-skinned alien stood in her place, one Ben recognized immediately as XLR-8, the Kineceleran speedster. Predictable, Ben muttered, slamming his own Omnitrix. The familiar transformation washed over him, but instead of choosing a counter to speed, Ben had gone with raw power. The light faded to reveal the massive form of Humongosaur. Let's see you run circles around this. Ben roared, his voice deeper and more gravelly in his dinosaur-like form. Jen, as XLR-8 lowered her visor. Size isn't everything, big guy. She vanished in a blur of motion. Ben felt a series of impacts against his legs and back, not enough to hurt his thick hide, but annoying nonetheless. He swung a massive fist, but hit nothing but air. Too slow. Jen taunted, skidding to a stop on the other side of the arena. Is this really the best the prime Ben Tennyson can do? Ben growled, increasing his size until he was nearly 20 feet tall. I'm just warming up. He stomped his foot, sending shockwaves through the crystalline floor. The vibrations disrupted Jen's next run, causing her to stumble slightly, just enough for Ben to clip her with a sweeping tail strike. The hit sent her tumbling across the arena, but she recovered quickly, getting back to her feet with her enhanced speed. Not bad, she conceded, her alien face showing a hint of surprise. But speed beats strength every time. She dashed forward again, but this time Ben was ready. Instead of trying to hit her, he slammed both fists into the ground, causing the crystal floor to crack and buckle in a radiating pattern. Jen couldn't adjust in time and tripped over the uneven surface, rolling to a stop near the arena's edge. The crowd roared with approval at the strategy. Ben advanced, each step shaking the ground. Give up yet? Jen's Omnitrix symbol flashed, and suddenly she wasn't XLR-8 anymore. In a blur of transformation, she had changed into a fiery alien Ben had never seen before, female-shaped but composed entirely of blue flame. Meet Inferna, she said, her voice now carrying an ethereal quality that echoed throughout the arena. One of my favorites. She thrust her hands forward, and jets of blue fire shot toward Ben. He crossed his arms defensively, but the flames were hotter than he expected. Even Humongosaur's tough hide couldn't completely resist the heat. That the best you got? Ben taunted through gritted teeth, though the burns were starting to sting. Just getting started, cousin. Jen flew upward, apparently this form could fly, and began circling Ben from above, raining down fireballs. Ben realized Humongosaur wasn't the right choice for this fight. He slapped the Omnitrix symbol on his chest, initiating another transformation. Big chill. Ben's new moth-like form spread its wings, his breath instantly cooling the area around him. Let's see how your fire deals with some ice. He exhaled a freezing vapor toward Jen, who dove to avoid it. Where the cold breath touched the arena floor, frost formed instantly. Interesting choice, Jen called out, still lobbing fireballs that Ben now easily evaded with his increased aerial mobility. But predictable. She suddenly changed direction, flying straight at Ben. He turned intangible, one of Big Chill's abilities, expecting her to pass through him harmlessly. Instead, she transformed mid-flight, her Omnitrix flashing just before contact. In Inferna's place was a ghostly figure Ben recognized as an Ectoneurite, the same species as his alien ghost freak. The female Ectoneurite passed through Big Chill despite his intangibility, and Ben felt a bone-chilling cold unlike anything he'd experienced. What the? Ben gasped, suddenly finding himself unable to maintain altitude. He spiraled downward, crashing into the arena floor with painful impact. Jen floated above him, her Ectoneurite form single-eye narrowed in satisfaction. In my dimension, I call this one Phantasma. She has a special ability, she can affect other intangible beings. Ben struggled to his feet, still feeling the effects of whatever she'd done to him. Quick transformer, huh? Let's see how quick. He slapped his Omnitrix again, transforming into Heat Blast. Fight fire with fire. Ben unleashed a torrent of flame, much hotter than what Jen had produced with her blue fire form. The sudden intensity caught her off guard, singing the edges of her ghostly form despite her intangibility. The crowd cheered as the battle intensified, flames and ghostly powers clashing across the arena in spectacular fashion. Jen backed away, then hit her Omnitrix again. This time, she transformed into a crystalline being similar to Diamond Head, but with a more feminine physique and sharper crystal formations. Meet Krista, she called out, her voice now resonating with a metallic quality. Let's see who's better with crystals. She thrust her hands forward, sending a barrage of crystal shards toward Ben. He countered with a wall of intense flame, melting many of the projectiles before they could reach him. The few that got through struck his fiery body, embedding briefly before the heat caused them to crack and fall away. Not bad, Ben admitted, increasing the intensity of his flames until his body glowed almost white-hot. But I've been Heat Blast longer than you've had that copycat. Copycat? Jen sounded genuinely offended. I've been handling the Omnitrix just fine for years. Maybe you're the copycat. Ben circled her, looking for an opening. If we're from different dimensions, we both got it independently. But only one of us is getting out of this arena as the winner. Jen formed her arms into crystal blades. Agreed. She charged, surprisingly fast for a crystalline being. Ben created a fire vortex around himself, but Jen leapt through it, her crystalline form resistant enough to the heat for a quick passage. Her blade arm caught Ben across the chest, sending him staggering backward. One thing about Krista, Jen explained with a smirk, she's got heat resistance upgrades compared to your diamond head. Ben narrowed his eyes. Then let's try something else. He hit his Omnitrix again, transforming into water hazard. How about a little H2O to cool you down? Ben unleashed powerful jets of water from his palms. The sudden change in tactics caught Jen off guard, and the water hit her directly. Steam hissed from her crystalline form as the rapid temperature change caused small fractures to appear along her surface. Smart, she admitted, backing away. But not smart enough. She hit her Omnitrix again, and this time transformed into a puddle-like alien that reminded Ben of goop, though her version was blue rather than green and moved with even greater fluidity. Say hello to Mercuria, Jen's voice bubbled from the amorphous form. Water won't do much against liquid metal. She surged forward, her liquid metal form easily absorbing the water Ben was projecting and continuing to advance. When she reached him, her form wrapped around his armored body, seeking gaps in his plating. Ben struggled, feeling the liquid metal seeping into his joints and restricting his movement. Get off me. He slapped his Omnitrix again, transforming into amphibian. Electrical energy coursed through his jellyfish-like body, conducting directly into Jen's liquid metal form. She screeched in pain, her form losing cohesion as electricity arced through her. She pulled away quickly, reforming a few yards distant, her liquid metal body visibly destabilized. That hurt, she admitted, her voice distorted. Give up? Ben asked, electricity still crackling around his tentacles. Instead of answering, Jen hit her Omnitrix again. This time, she transformed into a being made of pure energy, similar to NRG but without the containment suit, her form a swirling mass of radiation with feminine features vaguely visible in the glow. Meet Gamma, she announced, her voice now carrying a distinct radioactive crackle. She absorbs energy. Before Ben could react, she thrust her hands forward. The electricity surrounding Amphibian was suddenly drawn out of him and into her glowing form, causing her to grow brighter and more powerful. Thanks for the charge. Jen laughed, now pulsing with combined electrical and radioactive energy. Ben realized he needed to change tactics completely. He hit his Omnitrix again. Gravitack, he announced as his body transformed into the massive, planetary alien. Let's see how you handle a change in gravity. He raised his rocky hands, manipulating the gravitational field around Jen. Her energy form suddenly found itself subject to crushing gravitational pressure, forcing her toward the floor of the arena. Ugh, clever. She managed to say, her energy form compressing under the gravitational strain. But, not enough. With visible effort, she reached for her Omnitrix symbol and slapped it. In a flash, she transformed again, this time into an alien Ben had never seen before. Her new form was massive and bulky, with skin that looked like solidified magma and 4 powerful arms. Meet Tectonia, she announced, pushing against the increased gravity with her new form's incredible strength. Gravity doesn't bother someone who can bench press a mountain. She steadily rose to her feet despite the gravitational pressure, then slammed all 4 fists into the ground. The impact sent shockwaves through the arena floor that disrupted Ben's concentration, causing his gravitational control to falter. Taking advantage of the moment, Jen charged forward with surprising speed for such a bulky form. She caught Ben with a devastating uppercut that sent his planetary form spinning backward. Ben stabilized himself, creating a gravitational field to stop his momentum. Okay, I'll admit it, you've got some aliens I've never seen before. But I've still got a few tricks up my sleeve. He transformed again, this time into feedback. Let's see how your energy form handles an energy absorber of my own. Jen grimaced, her magma-like face cracking into what might have been a smile. Changing the battlefield. She slammed her Omnitrix again, transforming back into Krista, her crystalline form glinting in the arena lights. Without hesitation, she thrust her hands into the floor, causing massive crystal formations to erupt across the arena, reshaping the battlefield entirely. Towering crystal spires and walls created a maze-like structure. Hide and seek. Ben called out, losing sight of her as she ducked behind one of the crystal formations. Strategy, her voice echoed from somewhere in the crystal maze. Something you might want to try sometime. Ben moved cautiously through the crystal structures. As feedback, he had enhanced agility but was vulnerable to physical attacks. He needed to be careful. A crystal shard suddenly flew past his head, narrowly missing him. Then another, and another, a barrage from multiple directions. How are you doing that? Ben called out, ducking behind a crystal pillar for cover. Jen's laugh echoed through the maze. Krista has a few abilities your Diamond Head doesn't. Like remote control of detached crystals. More shards homed in on Ben's position, some curving in mid-air to navigate around obstacles. Ben leapt and dodged, but one caught him in the shoulder, drawing a pained grunt. All right, enough games, Ben muttered. He slapped his Omnitrix again. Echo, echo. The transformation into multiple sonic aliens gave Ben an immediate advantage. He split into 10 copies, each heading in different directions through the crystal maze. Multiple clones won't help you. Jen called out, still hidden somewhere in the maze. I can still. Her voice cut off as one of the Echo Echo duplicates rounded a corner and unleashed a sonic scream directly at her. The high-frequency sound wave struck her crystalline form, causing resonant vibrations that threatened to shatter her. Jen staggered backward, hitting her Omnitrix again. She transformed into what looked like a female version of Ditto, small, with a fin on her head, but with a more slender build and brighter coloration. Two can play the multiplication game, she announced, immediately splitting into multiple copies herself. Meet Icona. The battle suddenly escalated into chaos, with multiple Bens and Yents clashing throughout the crystal maze. Echo Echo's sonic attacks were devastating, but Jen's duplicates were more agile, leaping and bounding between crystal structures with incredible coordination. One of Jen's duplicates managed to reach the Omnitrix symbol on an Echo Echo copy, slapping it hard. The unexpected contact disrupted Ben's transformation, causing all his duplicates to revert to a single Echo Echo. How did you? Ben didn't get to finish his question as 3 of Jen's duplicates tackled him simultaneously. The Omnitrix responds to certain types of contact, one of the duplicates explained. I've been studying it longer than you think. Ben struggled against the pile of duplicates, then managed to hit his Omnitrix again. He transformed into Wildmutt, his powerful bestial form throwing off the smaller duplicates. Without eyes, Wildmutt relied on his other senses, which proved to be an advantage in tracking all of Jen's copies. He leapt from one to another, disabling them with precise strikes until only the original remained. Jen, back down to her original duplicate, hit her Omnitrix again. This time she transformed into a sleek, feline alien with midnight black fur and glowing green eyes, similar to Wildmutt in function but clearly a different species. Prowla, she introduced herself, crouching low in a predatory stance. Better senses than your dog form. The two bestial aliens circled each other, growling and snarling. Ben couldn't speak as Wildmutt, but his intentions were clear from his aggressive posture. They lunged at each other simultaneously, clashing in mid-air with a flurry of claws and teeth. Despite Wildmutt's greater bulk, Prowla's enhanced agility allowed her to land more strikes, opening cuts across Ben's orange hide. Ben realized he needed more precision. He hit his Omnitrix again, transforming into Kickin' Hawk. The avian martial artist form gave him the perfect combination of strength and technique. Let's settle this hand-to-hand, Ben challenged, assuming a fighting stance. Jen smiled, hitting her Omnitrix once more. She transformed into a lithe, humanoid alien with metallic silver skin and joints that seemed to bend in impossible directions. Flexia, she announced, her body flowing into a stance Ben didn't recognize. Master of 87 martial arts forms across the galaxy. What followed was the most intense hand-to-hand combat Ben had ever experienced. Flexia's form allowed Jen to attack from impossible angles, her limbs bending and stretching to bypass his guards. But Kickin' Hawk's natural combat instincts were formidable, and Ben managed to counter many of her strikes with powerful kicks and precise hand strikes of his own. The spectators roared with approval as the battle reached new heights of intensity. Even the Forger seemed to be watching with increased interest, its cosmic form leaning forward slightly from its position above the arena. "You're good," Jen admitted after a particularly effective exchange left both of them breathing hard. "Better than I expected." "You too," Ben acknowledged. "But this ends now." He slammed his Omnitrix again, transforming into 4 arms. The Tetraman's immense strength and 4 powerful limbs gave him a decisive advantage in close-quarters combat. Jen grimaced, realizing her current form wouldn't be enough. She hit her Omnitrix again, transforming back into Tectonia, her own 4-armed form. The two titans clashed in the center of the arena, their multiple fists creating thunderous impacts that shook the entire structure. The crystal maze Jen had created earlier began to crumble around them from the shockwaves of their battle. Despite Tectonia's impressive strength, Ben's experience as 4 arms gave him the edge. He caught 2 of her arms in his upper hands, then delivered a devastating double punch with his lower arms that sent her flying backward into one of the few remaining crystal structures. The impact was tremendous, shattering the crystal entirely and leaving Jen stunned. Before she could recover, Ben was on her again, grabbing all 4 of her arms and pinning her to the ground. "Yield," he demanded, his 4 eyes narrowed in determination. Jen struggled, but couldn't break free from 4 arms' grip. "Never." She slapped her Omnitrix again, transforming into a gaseous form similar to Ben's alien gutrot. Her body dispersed into a purple mist, slipping from Ben's grasp. "Toxina," her voice echoed as the gas swirled around Ben. "Breathe deep, cousin." Ben held his breath, but he could already feel his eyes watering from whatever chemicals her form was emitting. He quickly hit his Omnitrix again. Terra Spin. The turtle-like alien's ability to create powerful wind immediately came into play as Ben began spinning, creating a vortex that dispersed Jen's gaseous form across the arena. "Can't maintain cohesion." Jen's voice gasped as her gas form was stretched too thin. Taking advantage of her weakness, Ben increased his spinning speed, creating an even more powerful vortex. Jen was forced to transform again, returning to human form to avoid being completely dissipated. She landed hard on the arena floor, looking visibly exhausted. The rapid sequence of transformations was taking its toll, just as it often did on Ben during extended battles. "How many transformations have you gone through?" Ben asked, returning to human form himself, though keeping his hand near his Omnitrix. Jen pushed herself to her feet, breathing heavily. "Lost count." "You?" "Same." Ben couldn't help but grin. "You're pretty good with that thing. You're not so bad yourself." Jen activated her Omnitrix again, cycling through the available aliens. "But I've still got a few tricks left." "Same here," Ben replied, doing the same with his own device. "Final round?" Jen nodded. "Final round." They both slammed down on their Omnitrixes simultaneously, emerald light filling the arena from 2 sources. When the light faded, Ben stood as Automix, one of his most powerful aliens. Jen had transformed into something similar, though her version was sleeker, with glowing pink energy instead of green, and more feminine contours to the armored form. "Celestia," she announced, nuclear energy crackling around her form. "My universe's equivalent of your atomic alien. But with a few upgrades." The 2 nuclear powerhouses faced off, the energy radiating from their forms causing the very air to shimmer and distort. The spectators leaned forward in anticipation, sensing the climax of the battle approaching. HMENA HMENA HMENA. Ben chanted in Atomix's distinctive style, forming a ball of nuclear energy between his hands. Nuclear winner. He hurled the energy sphere directly at Jen, who raised her hands in response. Instead of dodging, she caught the sphere, the nuclear energy being absorbed into her form. "Nice try," she said, her voice echoing with power. But Celestia doesn't just control nuclear energy, she feeds on it. Her body glowed brighter, the absorbed power visibly enhancing her strength. She thrust both hands forward, releasing a beam of concentrated pink nuclear energy that struck Ben directly in the chest. The impact sent him flying backward, crashing through the remains of the crystal maze and into the arena wall. The barrier separating the combatants from the spectators flickered briefly from the power of the collision. Ben pulled himself from the wall, nuclear energy still swirling around his damaged form. "Okay, that hurt. Ready to give up?" Jen called, hovering above the arena, her form radiating even more power than before. "Not even close," Ben replied. He raised his hands again, this time forming multiple smaller energy spheres that orbited around his body. "Let's try this again." He sent the spheres flying toward Jen from multiple directions. She managed to absorb or deflect most of them, but two broke through her defenses, exploding against her shoulder and leg with enough force to disrupt her flight. She tumbled downward, catching herself just before hitting the ground. Both combatants were showing signs of fatigue now, their forms flickering slightly as they struggled to maintain their nuclear transformations. The Omnitrix symbols on both their chests began to flash, indicating they were reaching their time limits. "One final attack," Jen suggested, gathering her remaining energy into a swirling vortex between her hands. Ben nodded, doing the same with his own power. "Winner takes all." They both unleashed their attacks simultaneously, beams of concentrated nuclear energy that collided in the center of the arena with a blinding flash. The point of impact created a growing sphere of chaotic energy as neither combatant would yield, both continually pouring more power into their attacks. The spectators shielded their eyes as the light intensified. Even the forger seemed impressed by the display, its cosmic form shifting slightly in what might have been appreciation. The energy sphere continued to grow, becoming unstable as it absorbed more and more power from both attacks. Cracks began to appear in the arena floor beneath it, spreading outward like a spiderweb. "It's going to blow," someone shouted from the stands. Ben realized what was happening first. In a split-second decision, he redirected his beam upward, causing Jen's attack to shoot past him and into the arena wall. At the same time, he lunged forward, tackling Jen to the ground just as the energy sphere detonated above them. The explosion was tremendous, shaking the entire Colosseum. When the dust settled, both Ben and Jen had reverted to human form, their Omnitrixes timing out from the strain. Ben had shielded Jen with his body, taking the brunt of the explosion. He rolled off her, groaning in pain. "Why did you do that?" Jen asked, sitting up and looking at him in confusion. "You could have won." Ben coughed, sitting up beside her. "Winning isn't worth getting either of us killed. Besides, I've been in enough fights to know when something's about to go very wrong." For a moment, they sat in silence, both breathing heavily from exertion. Then, to Ben's surprise, Jen started laughing. "What's so funny?" he asked. "Just thinking," she said, still chuckling. "In my dimension, I'm always the one making the self-sacrificing moves. Grandpa Max says it'll get me killed someday." Ben grinned. "Your Grandpa Max sounds a lot like mine." "The challenge is complete," the forger's voice boomed across the arena. "Benjamin Tennyson has demonstrated worthy qualities. The victory is awarded to him." "Wait, what?" Jen protested, getting to her feet. "It was a draw at best." "Not according to the rules," Paradox explained, stepping through the barrier that had now been lowered. Victory conditions included incapacitation or surrender, but also demonstrating the qualities sought by the trial. Ben's willingness to sacrifice victory to prevent harm to an opponent was the deciding factor. The forger descended from its position, hovering before Ben. A small crystalline object materialized in front of it, a shard that glowed with the same blue light Ben had seen in the creature that had attacked his school. "The first fragment is awarded," the forger announced. "Take it, Wielder." Ben hesitantly reached out and grasped the crystal shard. The moment his fingers touched it, images flooded his mind, memories that weren't his own. He saw glimpses of Jen's life, her battles, her training with the Omnitrix. Techniques and strategies she had developed, aliens she had discovered that he had never encountered. "Whoa," Ben gasped, staggering slightly as the information integrated into his consciousness. What was that? "The purpose of the trial is not merely to determine the most worthy wielder," Paradox explained. "It is to create the ultimate wielder, one with the combined knowledge and experience of all who have carried the Omnitrix throughout the multiverse." Jen stepped forward, extending her hand to Ben. "Well, looks like you won fair and square. No hard feelings." Ben took her hand, shaking it firmly. "You were amazing. Some of those aliens. I've never seen anything like them. And I've never seen anyone use 4 arms with that level of skill," Jen admitted. "We each have our strengths." The forger raised its arms again, and the arena began to reconfigure itself. "The next challenge approaches. Prepare yourself, Ben Tennyson." Jen looked at Paradox. "Do I get to stay and watch?" The time traveler nodded. "Indeed. All defeated challengers remain to observe the tournament. After all, the fate of multiple universes may hang in the balance." Ben's Omnitrix beeped, indicating it had recharged. "So who's next?" As if in answer, another section of the floor opened, and a new platform rose into the arena. Standing on it was an older man with gray hair and a familiar build, familiar because Ben had known him his entire life. "Grandpa Max." Ben gasped. But it wasn't his grandfather, not exactly. This Max Tennyson was different. He stood taller, more muscular than Ben's grandfather had been even in his prime. And on his wrist was an Omnitrix, bulkier than Ben's, with a design that seemed more military than alien. "Not your grandfather," Paradox clarified. "Max Tennyson of Timeline Plumber, C629. In his world, he was the one who found the Omnitrix during his active plumber days." "Ben Tennyson," the alternate Max called out, his voice gruffer than Ben's grandfather but unmistakably similar. "I've heard a lot about you, son. Let's see if you live up to your reputation." Jen stepped back, moving to join the spectators. "Good luck," she called to Ben. "You're gonna need it. If he's anything like my grandpa Max, he's got decades of combat experience to back up that Omnitrix." Ben rolled his shoulders, wincing slightly from the lingering pain of his battle with Jen. He hadn't fully recovered, but there was no time for rest. "Ready when you are, Grandpa," Ben called back, though it felt strange addressing this alternate version of his grandfather that way. "Or should I call you Max?" The older man smiled, but it wasn't the warm smile Ben was used to seeing on his grandfather's face. This was the smile of a hardened warrior preparing for battle. "Max is fine," he replied, activating his Omnitrix. "Now show me what you've got, kid. I'm not going to go easy on you just because you look like my grandson." The forger's voice boomed once more. "Second challenge, Max Tennyson of Dimension Plumber, C629. Begin." Max slammed down on his Omnitrix without hesitation, transforming in a flash of green light. Where the older man had stood now loomed a massive, armored alien that resembled a combination of cannonbolt and NRG, a rolling, armored sphere that glowed with nuclear energy from within. "Meet reactor," Max's voice called from within the armored form. "Let's see how you handle this." He curled into a ball and began rolling toward Ben at incredible speed, leaving a trail of radioactive energy in his wake. Ben quickly activated his own Omnitrix. "Round 2, he muttered. "Here we go." Meanwhile, in Ben's home dimension, Gwen Tennyson and Kevin Levin stood in the wreckage of Bellwood High's parking lot, staring at the spot where Ben had vanished. "What just happened?" Kevin demanded, his hands still coated in metal from the beam he'd absorbed earlier. "Where'd he go?" Gwen's eyes glowed with mana as she tried to sense her cousin. "I don't know. It's like he just disappeared from this dimension entirely." The crystalline creature that had been attacking them had vanished along with Ben, leaving behind only a small glowing crystal shard embedded in the concrete. Gwen knelt beside it, careful not to touch it directly. "This isn't normal alien tech. It's giving off temporal energy signatures I've never seen before." Kevin frowned, kneeling beside her. "Think paradox is involved?" "Maybe." Gwen created a small mana bubble around the crystal, lifting it without direct contact. "But this doesn't feel like his usual work. Something bigger is happening." "So what's the plan?" Kevin asked, reverting his hand to normal now that the immediate danger had passed. Gwen stood, the contained crystal floating beside her. "First, we get this somewhere safe for analysis. Then we call Grandpa Max and the plumbers. And if that doesn't work, we find Azimuth," Kevin finished, already heading for his car. "The guy who made the Omnitrix should know what happened to it." Gwen nodded, following him. "And to Ben." As they drove away from the school, neither noticed the small temporal ripple that briefly appeared in the sky above Bellwood, a sign that something had fundamentally shifted in the fabric of reality itself. Whatever had taken Ben wasn't just a random event. It was the beginning of something much bigger. Back in the Nexus dimension, Ben faced his second opponent, an alternate version of his grandfather who wielded an Omnitrix with decades of combat experience behind it. As Max charged toward him in his reactor form, Ben slammed down on his own Omnitrix, transforming into Cannonbolt. "Let's see how you like a taste of your own medicine," Ben called out, curling into a ball and rolling to meet his opponent head-on. The two spherical aliens collided with earth-shaking force in the center of the arena, sending shockwaves through the crystalline floor. The battle for the ultimate wielder had only just begun. Chapter 2, Masters of the Watch. Ben's Cannonbolt form crashed into Max's reactor with a thunderous boom. The impact sent both aliens bouncing backward, gouging deep tracks in the arena floor. The spectators roared their approval as crystalline debris rained down around them. "Not bad, kid," Max called out, his reactor form glowing brighter. "But I've been handling the Omnitrix since before you were born." He unleashed a pulse of radiation that washed over Ben's armored exterior. Even through Cannonbolt's protective shell, Ben could feel the heat building. "Gotta switch it up," Ben muttered, slapping the Omnitrix symbol. In a flash, Cannonbolt was replaced by NRG, the radioactive alien still sealed in his protective suit. "Let's see how you like your own radiation fed back to you." Ben absorbed the energy Max was projecting, channeling it through his containment suit and firing it back in a concentrated beam. The attack caught Max off guard, striking his rolling form and sending him crashing into the arena wall. "Smart move," Max acknowledged, uncurling from his spherical form to reveal his full reactor appearance, a bulky, humanoid figure with glowing joints and a helmet similar to NRG's. "But predictable." Max slammed his hand against his Omnitrix symbol. His form shifted to something Ben had never seen before, a towering, robotic alien with multiple arms, each ending in different weapons. "Say hello to Arsenal," Max announced, his voice now tinged with mechanical reverb. "One of my favorites from the old plumber days." The weapons on his arms began charging, energy blasters, missile launchers, sonic emitters, all targeting Ben simultaneously. "Oh, that's just unfair," Ben muttered before diving aside as the first barrage hit where he'd been standing. The arena floor erupted in a series of explosions. Ben rolled to his feet, the containment suit of NRG making him slower than he'd like. He needed something faster, more agile. He hit the Omnitrix again, transforming into Fast Track. The speedster alien gave him just what he needed, allowing him to dodge the next volley of attacks with ease. "Can't hit what you can't catch, Grandpa," Ben taunted, circling Max at super speed. Max's arsenal form tracked him with computerized precision. Maybe not. But I can limit your options. He raised one arm and fired what looked like a specialized EMP grenade. When it detonated, it created a field of energy that significantly slowed Ben's momentum. Temporal dampener, Max explained as Ben struggled against the effect. Standard plumber equipment for dealing with speedsters. Ben gritted his teeth, pushing against the field. Even at reduced speed, he was still faster than a normal human. He managed to reach the edge of the effect and regain his full velocity. Not bad, Ben admitted. But I've got more than speed up my sleeve. He transformed again, this time into Lodestar. The magnetic alien immediately reached out with his powers, targeting the metallic components of Max's robotic form. Max struggled as his limbs began to move against his will, pulled by the magnetic forces Ben was generating. Clever, he grunted, fighting the control. But I didn't survive 40 years as a plumber by being unprepared. He hit his Omnitrix again. The robotic form dissolved, replaced by a gelatinous, amoeba-like alien with no metal components at all, a variation of goop that seemed more dense and controlled. Meet protoplasm, Max said, his voice bubbling from the shifting mass. No metal parts for you to manipulate. The amorphous alien surged forward, splitting into multiple tendrils that surrounded Ben. Lodestar's magnetic abilities were useless against this organic opponent. Ben transformed again, becoming Heat Blast. Let's see how well you handle the heat. He unleashed a firestorm that engulfed the gelatinous alien. Max's protoplasm form began to sizzle and harden as the moisture evaporated, but the veteran fighter wasn't done yet. He transformed again, this time into a crystalline being similar to Diamond Head but with a distinctly different structure. The crystals were darker, almost obsidian, with red energy pulsing through them. Obsidian, Max announced. Heat-resistant and twice as hard as your Diamond Head. He charged forward, crystal blades formed from his arms. Ben met the charge with intensified flames, but Max pushed through, the heat barely slowing him down. The two crashed together in a flurry of flames and crystal shards. Max's experience showed in his precise strikes, each one targeting critical points that would disable most opponents. Ben was forced onto the defensive, using Heat Blast's fire to create barriers between them. You're good, Ben acknowledged, blasting himself into the air on a column of flame to gain some distance. But I've faced tougher. Have you? Max challenged, raising both hands. The crystal floor beneath Ben suddenly erupted upward in a forest of obsidian spikes. Ben barely managed to avoid being impaled, twisting in mid-air and landing on one of the larger spikes. He needed something that could counter Max's crystal control. He transformed into Armadillo, the mechanical drilling alien slamming down onto the crystal forest with devastating force. His jackhammer arms shattered the obsidian constructs, sending shockwaves through the arena floor that disrupted Max's footing. Now we're talking. Ben shouted, charging forward with drill arms spinning. Max stood his ground, transforming again. This time, he became a massive, four-armed alien with thick, leathery skin and a face reminiscent of an ancient gargoyle. Titan. Max roared, catching both of Ben's drilling arms in his four massive hands. The two powerhouses struggled, the ground beneath them cracking from the force of their contest. Despite Armadillo's mechanical strength, Max's Titan form seemed to be gaining the advantage through sheer mass and leverage. Experience beats youth every time, Max grunted, forcing Ben's arms backward. Maybe, Ben acknowledged. But adaptability beats brute force. He hit his Omnitrix again, transforming into goop. The sudden change from solid to liquid caused Max to lose his grip, stumbling forward as Ben's form slipped through his fingers. Ben reformed behind Max, his acidic body wrapping around the larger alien's limbs. Max roared in pain as the acid began to eat through his thick hide. Forgot about that one, didn't you? Ben taunted. Max's response was to transform again, this time into a being made of living metal, similar to NRG but without the containment suit. His body glowed with energy as the acid hissed ineffectively against his new metallic surface. Metalloid, Max introduced his new form. Acid-proof and energy adaptive. He began to absorb the energy from Ben's acidic attacks, growing stronger. Ben realized he needed to change tactics again. He transformed into Water Hazard, blasting Max with high-pressure jets of water. The sudden change from acid to water caused no damage but succeeded in pushing Max backward across the slippery arena floor. "Keeping me off balance won't work forever, kid," Max called out, steadying himself. "I've been fighting aliens since before you were born." "Maybe so," Ben replied, continuing his water assault. "But I bet I've transformed more times than you have." As if to prove his point, he hit the Omnitrix again, becoming Big Chill. The moth-like alien's freezing breath immediately froze the water covering Max's metallic form, encasing him in a thick layer of ice. For a moment, it seemed to work. Max was immobilized, his metal body unable to break free from the thick ice. Then the ice began to glow from within, cracks appearing as Max's metalloid form superheated. The ice exploded outward, forcing Ben to turn intangible to avoid the shrapnel. Max stood in the center of the destruction, his metal body glowing white-hot. "Nice try," Max said, steam rising from his form. "But I've learned a few tricks over the years." He thrust his hands forward, and beams of concentrated heat shot toward Ben. Even in his intangible form, Big Chill could feel the intensity of the attack. It wasn't just heat, but some form of energy that could affect him even while phased. Ben dove aside, returning to solid form to avoid the strange energy. He needed a counter to Max's heat attacks. He transformed into Arctiguana, immediately unleashing a blast of his freezing breath. The two opposing forces, heat and cold, met in the middle of the arena, creating a massive cloud of steam that obscured both combatants. Ben used the cover to reposition, circling around to flank Max. But as he moved, he realized Max was no longer where he'd been. "Looking for me?" Max's voice came from directly behind him. Before Ben could turn, he felt a powerful impact against his back that sent him tumbling forward. He rolled to his feet, catching a glimpse of Max's new form, a sleek, predatory alien with natural camouflage abilities that made him nearly invisible in the steam. "Hunter," Max explained, his form shimmering as it adapted to its surroundings. "One of my go-to aliens for stealth operations back in the day." Ben tried to track him, but the hunter form moved with incredible speed and silence. Attacks seemed to come from all directions, striking Ben before vanishing back into the steam. "Enough hide and seek," Ben muttered. He transformed again, this time into Wildmutt. The bestial alien didn't need vision, his other senses could track Max regardless of his camouflage. Ben immediately located Max's position, leaping through the steam with a feral roar. He collided with the surprised hunter, both of them tumbling across the arena floor in a tangle of claws and limbs. Max broke free, transforming again into a massive, dinosaur-like alien similar to Humungosaur but with more natural armor and spikes, clearly a more evolved version. "Tyrannox," Max growled, the name fitting his new form perfectly. Ben responded by transforming into his own Humungosaur, matching Max's size and strength. The two titans clashed in the center of the arena, trading blows that shook the entire structure. Despite Ben's youth and vigor, Max's experience showed in every movement. He anticipated Ben's attacks, countering with practiced efficiency. Even as Humungosaur, Ben found himself being slowly overpowered. "You're strong, kid," Max acknowledged, catching one of Ben's punches and twisting his arm painfully. "But I've been fighting enemies bigger and stronger than you for decades." Ben grimaced, then suddenly smiled. "Yeah, but I bet they didn't do this." He slapped his Omnitrix, transforming directly while in Max's grip. The sudden change to chromastone caught Max by surprise, the crystalline alien slipping free and immediately absorbing the ambient energy in the arena. "Let's light this place up," Ben shouted, releasing the stored energy in a massive rainbow-colored blast that caught Max directly in the chest. The force of the blast sent Max's massive form flying backward into the arena wall with enough force to crack the barrier. For a moment, it seemed Ben had gained the upper hand. Then Max transformed again. His new form was unlike anything Ben had seen before, a swirling, humanoid vortex of cosmic energy that resembled a living galaxy. Cosmos, Max's voice echoed with newfound power. The first alien I discovered that wasn't in the original set. He gestured, and gravitational forces suddenly multiplied around Ben, driving him to his knees. Chromastone's crystalline body began to crack under the pressure. Every alien has a weakness, Max said, floating toward Ben. The key is knowing what it is and how to exploit it. Ben struggled against the crushing gravity, reaching for his Omnitrix. With tremendous effort, he managed to slap the symbol on his chest. Gravitack. He shouted as his body transformed into the planetary alien. The gravitational pressure immediately lessened as Ben countered with his own gravity powers. The two wielders faced off, each manipulating gravitational forces to attack and defend. Objects around the arena, debris from their battle, fragments of crystal, even pieces of the floor itself, began to orbit around them as their gravitational contest intensified. Spectators in the stands leaned forward in anticipation, sensing that the battle was reaching its climax. Among them, Jen watched with fascination. "He's good," she murmured. "Better than I gave him credit for." Paradox, standing beside her, nodded. Benjamin has always had a unique intuition with the Omnitrix. But Max has decades of combat experience. This will be close. In the arena, neither opponent seemed able to gain a decisive advantage. Max's Cosmos form had greater raw power, but Ben's Gravitack was specifically designed for gravitational manipulation, giving him finer control. Stalemate? Ben suggested, straining to maintain his gravitational field. Hardly, Max replied. His form shifted again, this time to a sleek, technological alien that resembled a combination of upgrade and clockwork. Chronotech, he announced. Time and technology manipulation in one package. He thrust his hands forward, and a wave of temporal energy washed over Ben. Gravitack's movements suddenly became sluggish as local time around him slowed down. "That's cheating," Ben managed to say, his voice distorted by the time dilation. "That strategy," Max corrected, advancing on his slowed opponent. "Something you learn after decades in the field." Ben struggled against the temporal effect, his thoughts racing despite his body's slowdown. He needed something that could counter time manipulation. With tremendous effort, he reached the Omnitrix symbol and transformed again. Clockwork. The transformation broke him free of the time dilation, his mechanical body naturally resistant to temporal manipulation. Max seemed impressed. "Good choice. But can your version do this?" His Chronotech form began to shift and morph, parts of his body extending and reforming into complex machinery. Unlike Upgrade, who merged with existing technology, Chronotech seemed to create technology from his own substance. Weapons, shields, and devices Ben couldn't even identify formed around Max, all powered by his temporal energy. "Okay, that's new," Ben admitted, backing away slightly. Max didn't wait for him to recover. The weapons he'd generated opened fire, blasting Ben with everything from energy beams to temporal disruptors. Ben countered with Clockwork's time rays, creating bubbles of accelerated or decelerated time to intercept the attacks. The resulting collision of temporal energies created wild distortions throughout the arena, objects aging to dust in seconds or reverting to their component materials, sections of the floor experiencing different time rates. "You're disrupting the stability of the Nexus." Paradox called from the sidelines, actual concern in his normally composed voice. Neither combatant seemed able to hear him over the chaos of their battle. The temporal distortions were growing worse, spreading throughout the arena and threatening to reach the spectator areas. The Forger, who had been observing silently until now, raised a starry hand. Immediately, the temporal effects began to recede, contained by the Celestialsapien's immense power. "Enough," the Forger's voice resonated through the arena. The challenge is approaching dangerous parameters. Both Ben and Max paused, their forms still crackling with temporal energy. The contest will continue with conventional means only. No further temporal manipulation. Ben and Max exchanged glances, then nodded their understanding. Max transformed again, this time into a massive, insectoid alien with 4 arms and iridescent wings, similar to stinkfly but far more intimidating and armored. Mantis War, Max introduced his new form. Let's take this battle to the air. Ben responded by transforming into Jet Ray, the manta ray-like alien shooting into the air on his organic jetpack. The battle shifted to aerial combat, with Max's 4 arms firing globs of adhesive resin while Ben countered with neuroshock blasts from his eyes and tail. They streaked across the arena, performing aerial maneuvers that would be impossible for any conventional aircraft. Max's insectoid form was more physically powerful, but Ben's jet ray had superior speed and agility. You can't outfight experience, kid. Max called as one of his resin blasts finally connected, catching Ben's left wing and sending him spiraling. Ben recovered just before hitting the ground, transforming into Astrodactyl. The pterodactyl-like alien's energy whips lashed out, catching one of Max's wings and yanking him downward. Maybe not, Ben replied. But I can definitely outthink it. He used his whips to slam Max into the arena floor, following up with a barrage of energy stars from his beak. Max rolled aside, transforming in mid-motion into a hulking, rocky alien with magma flowing through cracks in his surface. Magmator, Max growled, his voice rumbling like an active volcano. Let's turn up the heat. He slammed his fists into the ground, causing the arena floor to crack open. Lava began to pour from the fissures, rapidly covering the battlefield and forcing Ben to gain altitude. Whoa, watch the collateral damage. Ben called, dodging a geyser of magma that shot upward. In a real fight, the environment is just another weapon, Max replied, manipulating the magma to form projectiles that he hurled at Ben. Ben transformed again, this time into Water Hazard. He countered the magma attacks with pressurized water blasts, creating clouds of steam wherever they connected. Then let's fight fire with water. Ben declared, intensifying his assault. The contrast between heat and cold created even more steam, once again obscuring the battlefield. Max used the cover to transform into something new, a ghostly, ethereal alien that could pass through the steam unaffected. Phantasm, Max's voice echoed from everywhere and nowhere. One of my more useful recon forms. Ben found himself under attack from an opponent he couldn't see or touch. Intangible hands grabbed him, tossed him, struck him from all directions. Water Hazard's abilities were useless against this spectral threat. Two can play the ghost game. Ben transformed into Ghost Freak, his own intangible form allowing him to counter Max's attacks. The 2 spectral aliens engaged in a bizarre battle, phasing in and out of tangibility, passing through each other and the environment. To the spectators, it appeared as flashes of movement and occasional visible confrontations when both became briefly solid. Impressive adaptability, Paradox commented from the sidelines. Benjamin is learning with each exchange. He's still losing, Jen pointed out. Max has an answer for everything he throws at him. Perhaps, Paradox replied with a mysterious smile. But the trial isn't merely about winning. In the arena, the ghostly battle continued until Max managed to catch Ben off guard with a sudden shift back to solidity. His phantasm form solidified just long enough to deliver a powerful strike that sent Ben crashing to the ground. Ben reverted to human form on impact, the Omnitrix timing out from the strain of so many rapid transformations. He pushed himself to his knees, breathing heavily. Max descended, returning to human form as well. His Omnitrix seemed to be handling the strain better than Ben's, likely due to modifications he'd made over his years of experience. Had enough, kid? Max asked, not unkindly. Ben looked up at this alternate version of his grandfather. Despite the differences, he could see the same core strength that his own grandpa Max possessed, the determination, the tactical mind, the unbreakable will. Not even close, Ben replied with a grin, climbing back to his feet. His Omnitrix beeped, indicating it had reset and was ready for use again. Max nodded approvingly. Good. Because I'm just getting started. They both activated their Omnitrixes simultaneously, green light washing over them as they transformed once more. Ben became 4 arms, the 4-armed Tetraman cracking his knuckles in anticipation. Max transformed into a similar 4-armed alien, but his was more angular, with armor-like plates covering his red skin. Quad Force, Max introduced his alien. More tactical than your brawler. They charged each other, 8 arms total engaged in a flurry of punches, blocks, and grapples. Despite Ben's raw strength, Max's form demonstrated superior technique, using leverage and momentum to counter Ben's power. It's not just about hitting hard, Max advised, executing a perfect throw that sent Ben tumbling across the arena. It's about hitting smart. Ben rolled to his feet, adapting his fighting style. Instead of relying on brute force, he began incorporating more of the martial arts techniques he'd learned over the years. The battle shifted from a simple slugfest to something more strategic. Max nodded approvingly as Ben blocked one of his more complex attacks. Now you're getting it. The two continued their battle, each demonstrating increasing respect for the other's abilities. The spectators watched in fascination as the fight evolved from a simple contest of strength to a showcase of skill and strategy. Eventually, both transformed again, Ben into Kickin' Hawk, Max into a similar avian alien he called Talon. Their battle became even more technical, a display of martial arts at superhuman speeds. You've had good training, Max acknowledged after a particularly effective combination from Ben. But experience still counts for something. He caught Ben's leg during a high kick and used the momentum to throw him across the arena. Ben recovered in midair, landing in a crouch and immediately launching back into the fight. Maybe, Ben replied, blocking a strike and countering with one of his own. But I've got something you don't. And what's that? Max asked, genuinely curious. Ben smiled. I've been fighting alongside my own grandpa Max for years. I know how you think. He feinted left, then dropped low in a sweeping kick that caught Max by surprise, exactly the same move his own grandfather had taught him years ago. Max stumbled, momentarily off balance. Ben pressed his advantage, landing a series of rapid strikes that drove the older fighter backward. For the first time in the battle, Max seemed truly impressed. Well played, kid. He hit his Omnitrix again, transforming into a crystalline alien similar to Diamondhead but with a more faceted, prismatic appearance. Prism, he announced. Let's see how well you adapt to this. The alien raised his hands, and suddenly the light in the arena began to bend and refract, creating illusions and false images. Ben found himself surrounded by dozens of identical Max duplicates, all moving independently. Optical manipulation, Max explained, his voice coming from everywhere at once. Which one is real, Ben? Ben transformed into Wild Mud again, relying on his senses rather than sight. He charged through the illusions, zeroing in on Max's actual location through scent and sound. Max barely had time to look surprised before Ben crashed into him, disrupting his concentration and shattering the illusions. Nice trick, Ben growled, pinning Max to the ground. But I've got a few of my own. Max struggled against Ben's grip, then smiled. So do I. He somehow managed to reach his Omnitrix and transform again. His new form was electrically charged, sending a painful shock through Ben's body that forced him to let go. Voltex, Max introduced himself, electrical energy crackling around his humanoid form. One of my personal favorites. Ben transformed into feedback, immediately absorbing the electrical discharge. Thanks for the power-up. He redirected the energy back at Max, who seemed surprised by the effective counter. Max switched tactics, transforming into a massive, plant-like alien similar to Wildvine but more massive and tree-like. Arboros, Max announced. Let's see how your electricity works against living wood. Massive vines erupted from the ground, wrapping around Ben before he could react. The plant alien's strength was impressive, squeezing Ben tight enough to make breathing difficult. The key to victory isn't always about matching power for power, Max lectured, tightening his grip. Sometimes it's about finding the right counter to your opponent's abilities. Ben struggled against the vines, then transformed again. Heat blast. The fiery alien immediately caused the vines to smoke and burn, forcing Max to release him. Ben followed up with a concentrated blast of flame that caught Max directly, setting his wooden form ablaze. Max transformed again, this time into a liquid alien similar to Water Hazard. Hydron, he announced, extinguishing the flames with a wave of water. The battle continued in this pattern, each combatant transforming to counter the other's latest form. The spectators watched in amazement as both Ben and Max demonstrated increasing creativity and tactical thinking. They're learning from each other, Paradox observed. Precisely what the trial intended. After nearly an hour of combat, both were showing signs of fatigue. Their transformations were becoming more strategic, designed to conserve energy while maintaining effectiveness. Finally, Max transformed into a towering, crystalline being similar to Diamond Head but far larger and more complex. Mega Crystal, he announced, his voice resonating through his massive form. My final play. The crystalline giant raised its hands, and the entire arena began to shake. Crystal formations erupted everywhere, reshaping the battlefield completely. Ben found himself having to constantly move to avoid being impaled or trapped. This is the culmination of 40 years of experience with the Omnitrix, Max declared. Can you match it? Ben considered his options. He needed something that could counter not just Max's current form, but his experience and tactical mind. He transformed one last time. Alien X. The Celestialsapien's form materialized in the arena, drawing gasps from the spectators. Even the Forger seemed to take more interest, leaning forward slightly on its cosmic throne. Impressive, Max acknowledged, genuine respect in his voice. But can you actually use it effectively? I remember how difficult Celestial Sapiens can be to control. What Max didn't know was that Ben had long since worked out an arrangement with Serena and Bellicus, the personalities within Alien X. While not instant, he could access the Celestialsapien's powers with much greater efficiency than in his early days. Ben raised a hand, and reality around Max's crystalline form began to warp. The crystals he had created throughout the arena began to reverse their growth, receding back into the floor. What the? Max started, before finding his own movements restricted as well. Not by physical means, but by localized alterations to physics itself. I've learned a lot about the Omnitrix too, Ben said, his voice carrying the cosmic echo of Alien X, including when to use its most powerful alien. Max struggled against the reality warping but found himself unable to break free. His megacrystal form began to shrink, returning to human size as Ben carefully manipulated the local reality. Finally, Max transformed back to human form, looking up at the towering Celestialsapien with a mixture of awe and respect. I yield, he said simply. You've earned this victory, Ben. Ben returned to human form as well, offering a hand to help Max up. I couldn't have done it without everything I learned from you during our fight. Max took his hand, rising to his feet with a rueful smile. That's the point of experience, passing it on to the next generation. The second challenge is complete, the Forger announced. Benjamin Tennyson has proven worthy. The victory is awarded to him. As with Jen's defeat, another crystalline fragment materialized before Ben. He reached out and took it, immediately experiencing a rush of memories and knowledge, Max's decades of experience with the Omnitrix, his techniques, his discoveries, all flowing into Ben's mind. Whoa, Ben staggered slightly, overwhelmed by the information. That's intense. The knowledge of a lifetime, Max said, placing a steadying hand on Ben's shoulder. Use it wisely. I will, Ben promised, looking at this alternate version of his grandfather with newfound respect. And, thanks. Max nodded, then moved to join Jen in the spectator area. As he walked away, Ben noticed something strange. The arena around them seemed less stable than before. Brief flickers of other realities occasionally showed through the walls, like tears in the fabric of space-time. Paradox approached, his expression more serious than before. "The trial is progressing well, Benjamin. But I'm afraid our time is growing short." "What do you mean?" Ben asked, gesturing toward the flickering reality around them. "And what's with the special effects?" "The Nexus dimension is experiencing increased strain," Paradox explained. "The Wielder's trial was never meant to last this long or be this elaborate. So, we need to hurry up." Paradox checked his pocket watch. "Indeed. Which is why your next challenge will be somewhat accelerated." Before Ben could ask what that meant, 3 platforms rose from the floor simultaneously. Standing on them were 3 very different figures. On the first was a woman Ben recognized with shock, Kai Green, his occasional ally and one-time crush. But this version wore a confident smile and an Omnitrix of her own, one with turquoise highlights instead of green. On the second platform stood what could only be described as an ancient warrior, a humanoid figure wearing primitive armor made from what looked like bones and alien metals. Around his wrist was a crude, prototype version of the Omnitrix, looking more like a gauntlet than a watch. The third platform held a being that was clearly not human, a 6-limbed, insectoid alien with compound eyes and iridescent chitin. Somehow, it had integrated an Omnitrix into its exoskeleton, the device pulsing with green light along its forearm. "Wait, I have to fight all 3 at once?" Ben asked, looking at Paradox in disbelief. The time traveler shrugged apologetically. "As I said, we must accelerate the process. The Nexus is becoming unstable." "The third challenge begins," the forger announced. Kai Green of Dimension Relic, D892, ROHK of the Ancient Earth, and Xantl of the Lepidopteran Collective. Victory conditions remain the same. Ben looked at his 3 new opponents, each one representing a completely different approach to the Omnitrix. "Well," he muttered, activating his own device, "this just got interesting." Meanwhile, in Ben's home dimension, Gwen and Kevin had made progress in their search. After analyzing the crystal shard from the school parking lot, they had contacted Grandpa Max and the plumbers for assistance. "The energy signature is definitely temporal in nature," Gwen explained, showing the readings to her grandfather in the plumber base beneath Bellwood. "But it's not like anything we've seen before, not even like Paradox's usual work." Max Tennyson frowned, studying the data. "And you're sure Ben just disappeared?" "One second he was fighting that crystal alien, the next they were both gone," Kevin confirmed. "Left nothing but this shard behind." "We need to contact Azimuth," Max decided. "If anyone knows what might have happened to the Omnitrix, it's him." "Already tried," Gwen said, frustration evident in her voice. "He's not answering any communications. According to the Galvan Council, he's locked himself in his laboratory and won't come out for anyone." "Then we go to him," Max said firmly. "Prep the Rust Bucket 3. We're heading to Galvan Prime." As they prepared for departure, none of them noticed the small temporal distortions that had begun to appear throughout Bellwood, subtle at first, just brief flickers of alternative versions of familiar locations, visible for milliseconds before disappearing again. Something was happening to the fabric of reality itself, spreading outward from the point where Ben had vanished. And it was accelerating. Back in the Nexus dimension, Ben faced his 3 new opponents. Kai stepped forward first, her confident stance showing she was no stranger to combat. "Ben Tennyson," she called out. "In my world, I found the Omnitrix in the ruins of an ancient temple. Used it to become the greatest archaeologist and relic hunter in history." She activated her device. "Let's see if your version measures up." The ancient warrior, Roke, growled something in a language Ben didn't understand. His primitive Omnitrix sparked with unstable energy. The insectoid alien, Xantl, clicked its mandibles together. "This one has studied the Omnitrix extensively. Your mammalian application seems inefficient. Great, Ben muttered. A critic. Kai transformed first, her body enveloped in turquoise light. When it faded, she had become a sleek, cat-like alien with Egyptian styling to its armor and decorations. Batet, she announced. Goddess of protection in my world. Roke slammed his fist against his primitive Omnitrix, transforming with a crackle of unstable energy into a massive, rocky being that resembled a more primal version of Gravitac, less controlled, more raw power. Xantil's transformation was more subtle, its exoskeleton simply reconfiguring into a more armored form with additional limbs and what looked like organic weapons growing from its forearms. Ben took a deep breath, then transformed himself. Spider Monkey. The agile, four-armed simian gave him the mobility he'd need against multiple opponents. He leapt into action immediately, firing webs to create a network of strands throughout the arena. Smart opening move, Kai acknowledged, her feline form leaping with incredible grace to avoid the webs. But predictable. She countered with surprising speed, nearly catching Ben with a sweeping kick. He barely evaded, using his webs to pull himself to safety. Meanwhile, Roke had begun hurling massive boulders torn from the arena floor, forcing Ben to constantly adjust his position. The primitive alien seemed to rely more on raw power than finesse. Xantil was the most methodical, analyzing Ben's movements and occasionally firing precise shots from its organic weapons, not aiming for Ben directly, but cutting his web strands at critical points to limit his mobility. 3 against 1 isn't exactly fair, Ben complained, swinging between attacks. Life rarely is, Kai replied, cutting through a web strand with claws that extended from her fingertips. Adapt or lose. Ben realized he needed to change tactics. Fighting all 3 simultaneously wasn't working. He needed to divide and conquer. He transformed into Ditto, immediately splitting into multiple copies. Each copy targeted a different opponent, forcing them to split their attention. Now it's 3 against 3, one Ditto announced cheerfully. Kai seemed amused by the strategy. Clever. But each copy shares your pain, doesn't it? To demonstrate, she caught one Ditto with a swift strike that sent it tumbling across the arena. All the copies winced simultaneously, feeling the impact. Worth a try, the primary Ditto muttered, before transforming again. This time, Ben became Echo, creating truly independent duplicates that fanned out across the arena. Each began emitting sonic screams targeted at different opponents. Kai's sensitive feline hearing made her particularly vulnerable to the sonic attack. She transformed again, becoming a liquid metal being similar to goop but with a more metallic sheen. Quicksilver, she announced, her voice now carrying a metallic resonance. Sound waves pass right through me. Roke seemed less affected by the sonic attack, his rocky form absorbing much of the vibration. He responded by slamming his fists into the ground, creating shockwaves that disrupted several Echo duplicates. Xantil, however, was clearly suffering from the sonic assault. Its exoskeleton vibrated painfully, forcing it to transform into a more gelatinous form that absorbed the sound waves. Ben recognized his advantage and pressed it, focusing more duplicates on Xantil. The alien retreated, forced to maintain its defensive form. One down, temporarily, Ben thought, redirecting his attention to Kai and Roke. He transformed again, this time into Upgrade. The technological alien immediately merged with the arena floor itself, using the crystalline technology to create traps and barriers that separated his opponents from each other. Kai found herself enclosed in a rapidly shrinking crystal cage. Impressive resourcefulness, she acknowledged, transforming again. This time, she became a ghostly, phantom-like alien that phased through the crystal barriers with ease. Apparition, she announced. A little something I picked up in the catacombs of Aner Trancel. Roke, meanwhile, had simply smashed through the barriers with brute force, his primitive Omnitrix sparking with each impact. The ancient warrior roared in challenge, clearly preferring direct confrontation. Xantil had recovered somewhat, transforming into a flying insectoid form that allowed it to escape the remaining barriers by going over them. Ben reformed as Upgrade, then transformed again. Terra Spin. The turtle-like alien immediately began spinning, creating powerful wind currents that disrupted Xantil's flight and even affected Kai's ghostly form, dispersing her somewhat. Roke, however, was too heavy to be moved by the wind. He used the opportunity to charge directly at Ben, primitive Omnitrix raised to strike. Ben shifted his spin direction, creating a focused air current that propelled him away from Roke's charge. The ancient warrior crashed into a barrier, destroying it but missing his target. "You guys are good," Ben called out, ceasing his spin briefly. "But I'm better." "Confidence," Kai's dispersed form commented, slowly reforming. "Or arrogance." "Experience," Ben corrected, transforming again. Automix. The nuclear powerhouse immediately raised his hands, creating orbs of atomic energy that he launched at all three opponents simultaneously. Kai's ghostly form was particularly vulnerable to the energy attack, forcing her to transform again, this time into a crystalline being similar to Diamond Head. Crystal, she named her form simply. Roke took the blast directly, his rocky form absorbing much of the impact but still being driven backward. He responded by transforming as well, becoming a fiery being similar to Heat Blast but more primal and uncontrolled. Xantil dodged the energy blast with remarkable agility, transforming mid-flight into a technological alien similar to Upgrade but with distinct insectoid characteristics still visible. "Three very different approaches to the Omnitrix," Paradox commented from the sidelines. "Kai uses it as a tool for specific situations. Roke channels its power through primal emotion. And Xantil applies analytical precision to each transformation." "And Ben?" Jen asked, watching the battle intently. "Ben adapts," Paradox replied simply. "That is his greatest strength." In the arena, the battle had escalated significantly. Ben's Automix form was trading energy blasts with Kai's crystal shards and Roke's fireballs, while simultaneously trying to avoid being ensnared by Xantil's technological tentacles. Despite fighting three opponents at once, Ben was holding his own, even gaining ground in some moments. The experience and knowledge he had absorbed from his previous victories were clearly helping, allowing him to anticipate attacks and counter more effectively. "You've had practice," Kai observed, her crystal form regenerating from a particularly powerful blast. "But so have we." She signaled to the others, and suddenly their attacks became more coordinated. Roke's fireballs herded Ben into positions where Xantil could attempt capture, while Kai provided covering fire with crystal shards to prevent easy escape. "Teamwork," Ben muttered. "That's not fair." He transformed again, becoming Goop. The amorphous alien slipped through their coordinated attacks with ease, reforming safely at a distance. Time to even the odds, Ben decided. He needed to eliminate at least one opponent quickly. He transformed into Jet Ray, shooting toward Roke with incredible speed. The ancient warrior tried to track him with fireballs, but Ben was moving too fast. He struck Roke directly with neuroshock blasts from his eyes and tail, targeting the primitive Omnitrix on his wrist. The unstable device sparked and sputtered, clearly damaged by the precise attack. Roke roared in pain and anger, his fiery form flickering as the Omnitrix struggled to maintain the transformation. Ben followed up with another neuroshock blast directly to the device. The primitive Omnitrix finally overloaded, forcing Roke back to his human form, a muscular, primitive man with tribal markings and animal hide clothing. Roke tried to reactivate his device, but it merely sparked and smoked. He was effectively out of the fight. "One down," Ben announced, immediately turning his attention to Xantil. The insectoid alien's analytical approach made it dangerous but predictable. Ben transformed into Water Hazard, dousing Xantil's technological form with high-pressure water. The liquid caused short circuits throughout its system, disrupting its control. Xantil quickly transformed again, this time into a crystalline form similar to Kai's but with distinct insectoid features still visible in the faceting. "This one adapts," Xantil clicked. "Mammalian creativity has advantages." "Thanks." "I think," Ben replied, already transforming again. He became Heat Blast, immediately raising the temperature around both crystalline opponents. While not enough to melt their forms entirely, the heat caused stress fractures to appear throughout their structures. Kai recognized the danger first. Change tactics. She called to Xantil. They both transformed simultaneously, Kai into a water-based alien similar to Water Hazard, Xantil into a plant-like being with vines and pods covering its still insectoid body. Bad choice, Ben commented, intensifying his flames. While Kai's water form could counter the heat, Xantil's plant form was highly vulnerable. The alien realized its mistake too late as its vines began to smoke and wither. Ben focused his attack on Xantil, forcing the alien to transform again or risk serious damage. In its haste to change, Xantil selected poorly, becoming an ice-based alien that immediately began to melt in the residual heat. Tactical error, Xantil acknowledged, its form destabilizing rapidly. Ben pressed his advantage, transforming into NRG and releasing a focused beam of radiation that completely destabilized Xantil's ice form. The alien collapsed into a puddle, its Omnitrix timing out from the strain. And then there was one, Ben said, turning to face Kai. She nodded appreciatively. Divide and conquer. I'd have done the same. Unlike the others, Kai showed no signs of fatigue or strain. Her control of the Omnitrix was precise and efficient, conserving energy for when it was truly needed. You're good, Ben acknowledged. Maybe the best I've faced so far. Archaeological expeditions in hostile environments tend to hone your skills, Kai replied. In my world, I've had to use the Omnitrix to survive everything from ancient temple traps to alien guardians. She transformed again, becoming a sleek, streamlined alien that seemed built for speed and precision. Velocity, she introduced her new form. Let's finish this properly. What followed was perhaps the most technical battle Ben had experienced yet. Kai's fighting style was efficient and precise, never wasting movement or energy. She clearly knew her alien's capabilities intimately and switched between them with perfect timing to counter Ben's every move. Ben found himself being forced to fight smarter rather than harder. Raw power wasn't enough against Kai's precision and experience. He transformed into Brainstorm, the massive-brained alien allowing him to calculate and predict Kai's movements. Your combat algorithms are impressive but ultimately predictable, he declared in Brainstorm's pompous tone. I can anticipate your tactical decisions with 93.7% accuracy. Maybe, Kai acknowledged, transforming into a telepathic alien similar to a female version of Brainstorm. But can you counter this? She launched a telepathic assault that caught Ben off guard, momentarily scrambling his thoughts. He staggered backward, transforming into Chromastone to block the mental attack. Nice try, Ben said, recovering quickly. But I've faced telepaths before. The battle continued, both wielders demonstrating incredible skill and adaptability. They seemed evenly matched, neither able to gain a decisive advantage. Finally, after what seemed like hours but was likely only minutes, both transformed into their most powerful forms, Ben as Automix, Kai as Celestia, a female equivalent with similar nuclear capabilities. Their final exchange shook the entire arena, nuclear energy washing over the spectators' barrier in waves of heat and radiation. When the light faded, both stood in human form, their Omnitrixes timing out simultaneously. Kai was breathing hard, a slight smile on her face. Draw. Ben, equally exhausted, nodded. Draw. The third challenge is complete, the forger announced. All three opponents have been neutralized or stalemated. Victory is awarded to Benjamin Tennyson. 3 crystal fragments appeared before Ben this time, one for each opponent. He collected them, experiencing another rush of knowledge and experience. Roke's primal connection to his transformations, Xantil's analytical precision, and Kai's archaeological expertise and efficient combat techniques all flowed into his mind. That's a lot to process, Ben said, swaying slightly from the mental strain. You'll adapt, Kai said, approaching him with a respectful nod. You've earned it. As the defeated challengers moved to join the spectators, Paradox approached Ben with increased urgency in his step. Well done, Benjamin. Truly impressive. However, I'm afraid we have a problem. He gestured around them, and Ben noticed that the reality fluctuations had worsened significantly. Parts of the arena were now periodically shifting into entirely different environments before snapping back. The nexus is becoming increasingly unstable, Paradox explained. The energies released during these battles are accelerating the deterioration. Can't the Forger fix it? Ben asked, looking toward the Celestialsapian. The Forger is already expending considerable power maintaining what stability remains, Paradox said. We must proceed to the final challenge immediately. Final? Ben looked surprised. I thought there would be more. Originally, yes. But circumstances have changed. Paradox checked his pocket watch, his expression growing more concerned. Time grows short, in more ways than one. The floor shifted again, and a new platform rose from below. Standing on it was a figure that made Ben's blood run cold. It looked like him, an older version, perhaps in his 30s. But the similarities ended there. This Ben wore armor made from what appeared to be pieces of various alien technologies, all integrated into a battle suit that radiated power and menace. His face was scarred, one eye replaced by a cybernetic implant that glowed with eerie green light. And on his wrist was an Omnitrix unlike any Ben had seen, larger, more aggressive in design, with spikes and protrusions that gave it a weaponized appearance. Ben 10,000, Paradox introduced the newcomer. Though not the one you've met before. This is from Timeline Warlord F773, a reality where you chose a different path. The Warlord Ben smiled, the expression devoid of warmth. So you're the prime version I've heard so much about. The one who never had the courage to do what was necessary. Ben tensed, instinctively reaching for his Omnitrix. And what exactly was necessary in your world? Total control, Warlord Ben replied simply. In my reality, I realized the truth, with the power of the Omnitrix, I could end all conflict, all suffering, by taking command. One ruler, one law, enforced by the most powerful weapon in the universe. He raised his modified Omnitrix. And I succeeded. My Earth knows perfect peace, because everyone knows that defiance means facing me and my Omnitrix army. Omnitrix army? Ben asked, not liking the sound of that. Warlord Ben's smile widened. Oh, you have no idea what the Omnitrix is truly capable of. Azimuth built in limitations to keep wielders like you in check. I removed those limitations. The final challenge begins, the Forger announced. Ben Tennyson of Timeline Warlord F773. Victory conditions remain unchanged. Ben activated his Omnitrix, cycling through his aliens. Something tells me this is going to be the toughest one yet. You have no idea, Warlord Ben replied, activating his own device. Instead of transforming immediately, his modified Omnitrix projected a holographic display showing dozens of alien forms, far more than Ben had access to. I've unlocked the full database, Warlord Ben explained, noting Ben's surprise. Over 1 million DNA samples. And I've mastered every single one. He selected an alien and transformed. His body shifted into a form Ben recognized but had never personally used, a Celestialsapian. Alien X, Warlord Ben announced, his voice carrying the cosmic echo typical of the species. But unlike you, I don't have to negotiate with Serena and Bellicus. I removed them from the equation long ago. Ben felt a chill run down his spine. What kind of version of himself would do something like that? That's not possible, Ben said. Celestial sapiens have multiple personalities by nature. You can't just remove them. Can't I? Warlord Ben raised a hand, and reality around Ben began to distort. I've had decades to perfect my control over the Omnitrix. There's nothing I can't do with it now. Ben transformed into his own Alien X, hoping to counter the reality warping. But he immediately found himself at a disadvantage. While he still needed to reach consensus with Serena and Bellicus for major actions, Warlord Ben had no such limitation. Serena. Bellicus. Ben called out within the void of Alien X's consciousness. I need your help, now. The two faces appeared, looking unusually concerned. We sense another Celestialsapian, Bellicus growled. But it's wrong. He's removed his other personalities, Ben explained quickly. He's using Alien X's power without any checks or balances. That's an abomination, Serena gasped. A violation of the very nature of celestial sapiens. Will you help me stop him? Ben asked. For once, both personalities agreed without argument. Yes, they said in unison. We grant you full access to our powers. Outside, in the physical world, the two Alien X's faced off, reality warping around them as their powers clashed. Spectators watched in awe as sections of the arena transformed, disappeared, reappeared with different properties, all in rapid succession. Impressive, Warlord Ben acknowledged. You've gained better control since I was your age. But you're still bound by their consensus. I answer to no one. He gestured, and suddenly Ben found Alien X's powers blocked. Somehow, Warlord Ben had created a localized reality where Celestialsapian abilities were neutralized. How? Ben began, before being struck by a blast of energy that sent him crashing through several barriers. I told you, Warlord Ben approached, still in his corrupted Alien X form. I've had decades to perfect my control. I can selectively alter reality to counter any alien you become. Ben transformed again, becoming Chromastone. The crystalline alien absorbed the next energy blast Warlord Ben fired, redirecting it back at him. The energy simply vanished before reaching its target. Energy manipulation won't work either, Warlord Ben said, sounding almost bored. I've fought and defeated every alien combination you can imagine. He transformed again, this time into something Ben had never seen, a massive, draconic alien with multiple heads and what appeared to be different elemental powers emanating from each one. Hydra, Warlord Ben introduced his new form. Extinct for 10,000 years in most timelines. But I recovered the DNA from a fossilized sample. The multiple heads unleashed simultaneous attacks, fire, ice, acid, electricity, and other elements Ben couldn't even identify. He transformed into Big Chill, turning intangible to avoid the barrage. Predictable, Warlord Ben commented. One of his heads breathed a strange, purple mist that somehow affected Ben even in his intangible state, causing him to solidify against his will. What the? Ben barely managed to transform into Heat Blast before being struck by the ice breath from another head, nearly extinguishing his flames. I know every strength, every weakness, of every alien in the Omnitrix, Warlord Ben explained. There's nothing you can throw at me that I haven't countered 1,000 times before. Ben transformed rapidly, trying alien after alien, but Warlord Ben seemed to have a perfect counter for each one. Fast Track was caught in a temporal trap. Gravitax's gravity powers were reversed against him. Even Way Big was matched by an equally enormous form with superior strength. Is this really the best the Prime timeline can offer? Warlord Ben taunted, reverting to human form after the latest exchange. Pathetic. Ben, back in human form as well, was breathing heavily from exertion. Despite all the knowledge and experience he had gained from previous victories, this version of himself was simply on another level. How did you become this? Ben asked, genuinely disturbed by his alternate self. Warlord Ben's expression darkened. I lost everyone. Gwen, Kevin, Grandpa Max, all of them, to an enemy I should have been able to defeat. That's when I realized the truth, mercy is weakness. Half measures cost lives. The only path to true peace is absolute control. That's not protection, Ben argued. That's tyranny. Call it whatever you want, Warlord Ben replied coldly. It works. My Earth hasn't seen war, crime, or significant suffering in 20 years. Because everyone's too afraid of you to step out of line. Precisely. Warlord Ben smiled without humor. Fear is a powerful motivator. He activated his Omnitrix again, transforming into yet another alien Ben had never seen, a humanoid figure with shifting, smoke-like features that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Night Terror, Warlord Ben introduced his new form. It feeds on fear and doubt, something you have in abundance right now. The alien extended its arms, and tendrils of darkness shot toward Ben. They wrapped around him before he could transform, penetrating his mind directly. Ben suddenly found himself experiencing his worst fears, failing to save his loved ones, the Omnitrix being used for destruction instead of protection, becoming the very thing he fought against. Stop fighting it, Warlord Ben's voice echoed in his mind. This is what awaits you eventually. I'm just further along the path. Ben struggled against the psychic assault, reaching for his Omnitrix. With tremendous effort, he managed to activate it, transforming into feedback. Get out of my head. Ben shouted, using feedback's energy absorption abilities to drain the psychic attack. The connection between them reversed, and suddenly Ben found himself receiving flashes of Warlord Ben's memories, the losses he had suffered, the choices he had made, the slow descent into tyranny justified as necessary protection. You're not me, Ben realized, breaking free of the connection entirely. You're what I fight against. He transformed again, this time into Diamond Head. Instead of attacking directly, he began creating crystal structures throughout the arena, not weapons, but reflective surfaces positioned at specific angles. What are you doing? Warlord Ben demanded, transforming into a lava-based alien to destroy the crystals. This won't save you. Maybe not, Ben acknowledged, continuing to create more crystals faster than they could be destroyed. But it might help me understand. The crystal network was nearly complete, a complex arrangement that captured and reflected light in specific patterns. When the final piece was in place, something remarkable happened. The combined reflections created a holographic display of the Omnitrix's inner workings, magnified and slowed down to visible speed. How did you, Warlord Ben began. I combined what I learned from everyone I've faced, Ben explained. Jen's crystalline precision, Max's technical expertise, Kai's analytical approach, even Roke's instinctive understanding of the Omnitrix's energy. He studied the holographic display, noticing something his alternate self had missed, a subtle pattern in the Omnitrix's core programming. You think you removed all limitations, Ben said, understanding dawning. But Azimuth is smarter than both of us. He built failsafes you never found, failsafes tied to the Wielder's intent. Warlord Ben laughed dismissively. Nice theory. But I've been using my modified Omnitrix for decades without any problems. That's because you convinced yourself your intentions were pure, Ben replied. But deep down, the Omnitrix knows better. And it's been working against you this whole time. He transformed again, becoming gray matter, the small but super-intelligent Galvan. Your Omnitrix isn't more powerful than mine, it's actually fighting itself, causing microfractures in its core matrix with every transformation. Warlord Ben's confidence faltered for the first time. He looked down at his modified device, noticing the hairline cracks that had begun to spread across its surface, cracks he had dismissed as cosmetic damage from battles. Impossible, he muttered. I've modified it perfectly. No one understands the Omnitrix perfectly, Ben replied. Not even Azimuth. That's why he built it to adapt and evolve, to learn from its wielder. And yours has learned that you're not worthy of its full potential. Warlord Ben's expression contorted with rage. I'll show you worthy. He slammed down on his Omnitrix with far more force than necessary. The transformation that followed was unlike anything Ben had seen, a chaotic amalgamation of different alien parts, powers shifting and changing unpredictably as the device struggled to maintain coherence. What's happening to me? Warlord Ben's voice distorted, shifting between alien tongues. Your Omnitrix is destabilizing, Ben explained, transforming back to human form. The fail-safes are activating all at once. The spectators watched in horror and fascination as Warlord Ben's form continued to shift and change, his modified Omnitrix glowing with increasingly unstable energy. "Help me," he demanded, reaching toward Ben with a hand that transformed from crystalline to fiery to tentacled in rapid succession. Ben looked at his alternate self with genuine pity. "I can't. This is the consequence of trying to force the Omnitrix to be something it was never meant to be, a weapon of control instead of a tool for understanding." Warlord Ben fell to his knees, his form still shifting chaotically. "I just wanted to protect everyone. By controlling them," Ben replied gently. "That's not protection. That's fear. And the Omnitrix was never designed to inspire fear." With a final, desperate look at Ben, Warlord Ben's form collapsed in on itself, the modified Omnitrix finally giving out completely. When the energy dissipated, he lay on the arena floor in human form, his device now dark and inert. "The final challenge is complete," the forger announced. "Benjamin Tennyson has proven worthy by understanding the true nature of the Omnitrix." A final crystal fragment appeared before Ben, larger than the previous ones. As he reached for it, he hesitated. "What happens to him?" Ben asked, looking at his defeated alternate self. "He will be returned to his timeline," Paradox explained, approaching the fallen warlord. "Without his modified Omnitrix. Perhaps, given time, he will find redemption." Ben nodded, then took the final fragment. The knowledge that flowed into him this time was different, not just experience or techniques, but a deeper understanding of the Omnitrix itself, its purpose and potential. As the final piece of knowledge integrated into his mind, Ben suddenly understood something crucial, the true purpose of the Wielder's trial. "It's not about finding the strongest wielder," he said, looking at Paradox. "It's about creating one who understands what the Omnitrix was meant to be." Paradox smiled. "Precisely, Benjamin. And now, I believe it's time for the final stage." The forger descended from its position, approaching Ben directly for the first time. The cosmic being towered over him, its starry form shifting constantly. "Benjamin Tennyson of Timeline Prime, A173 has completed the Wielder's trial," the forger announced. "The fragments must now be united." Ben held out the crystal fragments he had collected. They began to glow, rising from his hand and orbiting around him in a complex pattern. "What happens now?" Ben asked, looking at Paradox. The time traveler's expression grew serious. "Now we reveal the true reason for the trial." The Nexus dimension shuddered violently, reality fluctuations increasing dramatically. Through one of the larger rifts, Ben caught a glimpse of something that chilled him to the core, an absolute void, a nothingness that seemed to be consuming reality itself. "What is that?" he demanded, pointing at the disturbing sight. "That," Paradox replied grimly, "is what we've been preparing you for. The void, a transdimensional anomaly that consumes entire realities. It has already devoured dozens of timelines and grows stronger with each one it absorbs." "And you need me to stop it?" Ben asked, already guessing the answer. Paradox nodded. "Not just you. The ultimate wielder, one with the combined knowledge and experience of all who have carried the Omnitrix throughout the multiverse." The crystal fragments began to spin faster, drawing closer to Ben's Omnitrix. As they approached, his device began to glow with increasing intensity. The trial wasn't just a competition, Paradox explained as the process continued. It was preparation. Each victory, each fragment of knowledge, was another piece of what you'll need to face the void. "And what exactly am I supposed to do against something that eats entire realities?" Ben asked, watching as the fragments began to merge with his Omnitrix. "That," Paradox admitted, "we don't know precisely. The celestial sapiens have foreseen that only the ultimate wielder of the Omnitrix stands a chance. The how remains to be determined." "Great," Ben muttered. "No pressure or anything." The final fragment merged with his Omnitrix, causing the device to flash blindingly. When the light faded, it appeared unchanged externally, but Ben could feel the difference. The connection between him and the Omnitrix had deepened, become more intuitive, more complete. It worked, Paradox said with evident relief. The integration is complete. So what now? Ben asked, examining his enhanced Omnitrix. Do I go fight this void thing right away? Not quite yet, Paradox replied. There's one more piece to this puzzle. Before he could elaborate, a new disturbance appeared in the Nexus dimension, a portal opening from another reality. And through it stepped familiar figures, Gwen, Kevin, and Ben's grandpa Max, Ben. Gwen exclaimed, rushing forward. We've been looking everywhere for you. Gwen. Kevin. Grandpa. Ben stared in shock. How did you get here? Your friends are quite resourceful, Paradox explained with a smile. They managed to track the temporal signature of your disappearance, convince Azimuth to help them, and create a dimensional portal to follow you here. Wasn't easy, Kevin added, looking around at the increasingly unstable Nexus. What is this place? And what's with all the weird energy readings? It's complicated, Ben said, then noticed they weren't alone. Azimuth himself had stepped through the portal as well, looking around with scientific curiosity. So this is where you've been, Tennyson, the Galvan creator said, approaching Ben. Paradox's handiwork, I presume. With assistance from the forger, Paradox acknowledged, gesturing toward the Celestialcipian. Azimuth looked up at the cosmic being with rare respect. I see. The Wielder's trial has been invoked. You know about this? Ben asked in surprise. Of course I do, Azimuth replied with typical impatience. I built certain functions into the Omnitrix specifically for this eventuality. Though I had hoped it wouldn't be necessary in our lifetime. He examined Ben's Omnitrix, nodding in satisfaction. The integration appears complete. You've absorbed the knowledge and experience of multiple wielders. Not just that, Ben said. I understand the Omnitrix better now, what it was meant to be, what it can do. Good, Azimuth said simply. You'll need that understanding for what comes next. Which is what, exactly? Kevin asked, clearly frustrated by the cryptic exchanges. Paradox gestured toward the rifts showing glimpses of the void. That, Mr. Levin, is a transdimensional entity that consumes entire realities. It has already destroyed multiple timelines and continues to expand. If left unchecked, it will eventually devour all of existence. And let me guess, Gwen said, looking at her cousin. Ben's supposed to stop it somehow. With our help, Paradox clarified. The Wielder's trial was just preparation. The real challenge lies ahead. The Nexus dimension shuddered again, more violently this time. Pieces of the arena began to break away, dissolving into nothingness. We're running out of time, Azimuth said urgently. The Nexus can't sustain itself much longer. Then let's not waste any more of it, Ben said, activating his enhanced Omnitrix. What's the plan? Paradox, Azimuth, and the forger exchanged glances. We must return to your home dimension first, Paradox explained. That's where the void will manifest next, drawn by the energy signature of your enhanced Omnitrix. So I'm bait, Ben summarized. A necessary risk, Azimuth acknowledged. But you won't face this alone. He gestured toward the spectator area, where all of Ben's previous opponents, Jen, Max, Kai, Roke, Xantil, and even the recovering warlord Ben, had gathered. The trial has served another purpose, Paradox explained. It has united wielders from across the multiverse. Together, you may stand a chance against the void. Ben looked at the assembled wielders, each with their own Omnitrix and unique approach to using it. Then he looked at his friends and family who had come to find him. All right, he said with newfound determination. Let's do this. Together. Paradox nodded, opening a portal back to Ben's home dimension. The final battle awaits, Benjamin. Are you ready? Ben activated his Omnitrix, the holographic display showing aliens he had never seen before, new forms unlocked by the integration of the fragments. As ready as I'll ever be, he replied. Let's go save the multiverse. As they prepared to step through the portal, Ben cast one last look at the Nexus dimension, the arena where he had faced versions of himself he never knew existed, learned lessons he never could have imagined, and ultimately discovered the true purpose of the Omnitrix. Whatever came next, he knew one thing for certain, he wasn't the same Ben Tennyson who had disappeared from that school parking lot. He was more now, not just stronger or smarter, but more complete in his understanding of what it truly meant to wield the Omnitrix. The fate of all realities now rested on that understanding. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.